there, good morning. Thanks for showing up to hear me speak. I should start by saying that introduction notwithstanding, I don't actually speak for IBM, which is probably good for all of us. I do computer security. I've been doing computer security for a whole bunch of years, looking at data and security and how these things relate. As you can imagine, I'm pretty busy. I mean, a lot of stuff happens. And certainly financial systems are a lot of what we've been worrying about because that's where the money is. But recently there's been a change in how computers are being used. And I want to talk about that a little bit because I think it really affects my industry and it's going to affect you in ways that you don't expect. And the change is that everything is becoming a computer. It used to be that when we did computer security, we worried about computers, desktops, and then laptops. Right? But now everything is a computer. Right? This is not a phone. Right? This is a small portable computer that happens to make phone calls. Right? And similarly, your refrigerator is a computer that keeps things cold. And your microwave oven is a computer that makes things hot. And an ATM machine is a computer with money inside. Now, your car used to be a mechanical device, then it was an electromechanical device. Now it is a computer with 4 wheels and an engine. Or actually, it is a 100-plus computer distributed system with 4 wheels and an engine. And that's a really important change. Because what it means is what I do becomes applicable to everything everywhere. And all the lessons from computer security about vulnerabilities, about hacking, about complexity, about changes in technology become true for everything everywhere. And I'm not convinced we're ready for that. So one of the places you see this talked about in the news is supply chain. Right? So in the past year, there's been a lot of debate about 5G. Basically, Huawei, ZTE. The question is, should we trust Chinese companies with our telecommunications infrastructure? Huge debate in the US, elsewhere. The year before, if you were paying attention, you might have seen stories about Kaspersky. Should we trust Russian-made antivirus programs? And again, debate many countries. But really, this is very much the tip of an extraordinarily complex iceberg. And the question is, should you trust the country in which the company whose products and services you are using resides in? But there's actually a lot more than that. Where are the products made? Where's the software made? This thing is not made in the US. Its chips aren't fabricated in the US. Its programmers carry, 150 different passports? And what we know about supply chain is that any piece of it can be used to subvert the whole thing. So if you remember NotPetya, that was a worm that was introduced through a malicious update. And so attacking that part of the supply chain. Google is forever fighting battles against fake apps in their Google Play Store. A couple of weeks ago, we saw articles about Shadowhammer. Shadowhammer is a vulnerability. Somebody, we're not sure, used the ASUS update mechanism to introduce. So here is the update mechanism to your hardware. Remember 2015, there was a really impressive Snowden document showing NSA employees intercepting a Cisco router as it was being shipped from Cisco to the Syrian telephone company. Right? So we have to trust the hardware distribution mechanism. I saw a paper 2 years ago. You could actually infect an iPhone through a malicious replacement screen. We see examples of malware being dropped into software by programmers of we don't know who. Right? So there's a lot here. You have, in a sense, in supply chain, you have no choice but to trust everybody, even though you can't trust anybody. And I think of this as an insurmountably hard problem. Like, we are not going to make a national-only smartphone. Right? Even the US couldn't pull that off. And if we did, it would cost 10 times as much, and no one would buy it. New people probably wouldn't even buy it. Right? Our industry is deeply international. There is nothing we do in computing ever that doesn't involve dozens of different countries, many of whom are not friendly. And we're not going to solve that anytime soon. And that is a problem that largely we are not willing to look at in anything more than a superficial way. Then, should we trust Huawei routers? Should we trust Kaspersky antivirus? Right? No one is saying to Apple, look, you need to make sure your programmers only have US passports. You need to make sure your chips only come from countries on this approved friendly list. Right? That is not being done, and that'll probably never be done. And that's a huge problem. The other thing I want to mention is the way we're using computers has changed. And this also is going to affect us enormously. Right? It used to be that computing was something we would visit. Right? We would go to our computers. And if you think of the language of the internet, it really reflects that. Upload, download, go online, enter a chat room. It's very spatial, it's very physical. Right? What's changing is we are now interacting with computers in our environment. Right? Our car is a computer, and it's always on. Right? Something like Siri or Alexa or any of the smart city anythings. Right? These things are in our environment. And a lot of the rules by which we think about computers changes. Right? In many countries, there's a notion of notice and consent. And when we go to a website, we get a notice about data being collected, and we consent to it. Well, that doesn't work if the computer is in our environment, if it's a camera on the street, or some automatic crowd control sensor in this building. And also now computers are doing different things. Right? Computers are now connected to the world. When I think about how computers are changing, I think about automation, autonomy, and physical agency. That computers are affecting the world in a direct physical manner. And pretty much all systems are having some piece of this. So traditionally in my field, when we talk about security, we talk about something called the CIA triad. It's not that CIA, it's a different CIA. It stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Those are the three properties I'm supposed to provide. Right? Confidentiality, only authorized people have the data. Integrity, the data doesn't change. And availability, it's there when I need it. When you think about payment systems, you want all those three things. And traditionally, most of the time, I worry about confidentiality. When there's a security news story in the news, invariably it's a confidentiality story. Someone stole this data. Someone is misusing this data. Right? Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, huge US story. Someone got access to the data. Any kind of corporate data breach. Office personnel management, right? Chinese stole US government data. But that, is not the entire threat. Right? Ransomware is an availability threat. I can't get to my data. Someone hacking a bank and manipulating balances, nothing was stolen, but that is a data integrity attack. When you get to computers that affect the world in a direct physical manner, the integrity and availability attacks are much worse than the confidentiality attacks, because there's real risks to life and property. And so certainly I'm concerned that someone will hack into my hospital and steal my private patient medical records. Right? I don't want that to happen. But I really don't want them to change my blood type. Right? That is a data integrity attack. And I don't want them to hack into my car and turn on the Bluetooth microphone, eavesdrop on my conversations, figure out my location. But I really don't want them disabling the brakes. That is a data availability attack. Right? So when you get to a world of physically capable computers, the integrity and availability attacks matter much more than the confidentiality attacks. Cars, appliances, power plants, medical devices, smart city, anything. There's a fundamental difference between my spreadsheet crashes and I lose my data, and my embedded heart monitor crashes and I lose my life. But it could be the exact same CPU, right? The exact same operating system, the exact same vulnerability, the exact same attack tool, the exact same exploit. It's only what the computer is attached to that makes a difference. And that is the world that's coming. Right? That is the world of everything as a computer. And in that world, a lot of our long-standing security assumptions start failing. A lot of things that we've done over the past few decades no longer work. Right? Patching is how we get security. Right? That really only works because there's a team of engineers at Apple and elsewhere that can write patches and push them down to this phone on demand, right? You know, we can't make this secure, so we can be agile about security. Right? That fails in low-cost embedded devices. The teams don't exist. The devices aren't patchable. They're around for much longer. Right? So that assumption no longer works. Authentication assumptions, which is the mainstay of a lot of what we do, rely on the fact that I authenticate. I authenticate to my device, which is my fingerprint. I authenticated to my email. Right? I authenticated to some object or some remote service. We're going to have to start doing thing-to-thing authentication, where things authenticate to each other without me being involved, ad hoc. And imagine a driverless car scenario. And lastly, the notion that the internet can be a regulation-free zone starts failing. Because that was only held because it didn't matter. Because even if it's about money, it largely doesn't matter in a way that attacks that affect life and property do. And I predict that my industry is going to have a lot more government oversight. It's going to have a lot more regulation, have a lot slower innovation. That when we start looking like automobiles or airplanes or the power grid or weapons systems. And that's going to affect everything we do. So when I think of payments, it is wholly digital, but not really. Because it is going to interact with the real world. It's going to be automatic, it's going to be ad hoc, it's going to be on demand. It's going to be integrated into larger physical systems. And I think the changes in my industry are going to roll into everything else. And I sort of urge you to think about that. And if I can give you one last piece of advice, which I'll give with no explanation, that when you think about payments in the future, for the love of God, do not use a blockchain. Thank you.